We have an update on the story involving a Berlin attacker, the man who drove a truck into a Christmas market, killing 12 individuals and wounding dozens of others. Police officers in Italy, Milan to be specific, shot and killed the man. 24-year-old Tunisian Anis Amri was killed following a dramatic encounter in Milan after a two-man patrol stopped him for questioning around 3:15 a.m. on suspicion of burglary. Now, he had a history of criminal activity, so it's unsurprising that they ID'd him for a possible burglary. But one of the officers requested his identification, and he responded by pretending to fish in his backpack for documents. Instead, at that point, he pulled out a gun, shooting one officer in the shoulder. At that point, the other officer grabbed his gun and shot and killed him. Hours after the shootout, the Islamic State released a video of him purporting to show him swearing allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the self-proclaimed caliph of the Islamic State. So in it, he is urging Muslims all throughout Europe to stand up and to fight back against what he referred to as the Crusaders.
Okay, so sometimes they'll link ISIS when they shouldn't to an attacker. So, for example, the Orlando shooter that did the massacre here in the U.S., at some point he's like, I guess this is for ISIS, whatever. And he was actually a closeted gay guy who had relationships with the people in that gay nightclub.
I didn't know that ever. I thought that got debunked and not substantiated enough to say that definitively.
No, there was the people who tried to debunk it, but there was a solid witness who said, yeah, he came. No, there were many witnesses who said he came to the club many times, and there was one witness on camera who said that he knew exactly who he'd been in relationships with and was angry at. Okay, so but his connections to ISIS were non-existent, other than I guess ISIS, right? That he said right before.
Well, and maybe, I mean, to be fair seems like the wrong word. Some degree of a total outsider sympathy, no connection, obviously, no meeting, no communication of any kind. But
they didn't help him anyway, right. He, et cetera, right? This guy in Germany, yes, ISIS. So he apparently got some training. He's doing propaganda videos. He's trying to encourage other people to do it, pledging allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. No question about it. As radical Islamic terrorist as it gets, and killed 12 people, injured nearly 50, and right on the eve of Christmas. So let's talk about what went wrong, how we could possibly begin to fix it. So what went right is that where he was in Italy, he was originally detained because of his criminal activities. Unfortunately, when they put him in prison for 4 years, he apparently got radicalized there. So his family and acquaintances in Tunisia says he used to drink alcohol, was not particularly religious, goes into jail, gets radicalized. Now, the Italians do things that are correct then. The Bureau of Prisons in Italy warns the anti-terrorism units in Italy and elsewhere in Europe, watch out, this guy got radicalized. We know it. So Italy sets to deport him. Now, problem number one, Tunisia won't accept him back. Right. They say, oh, I don't know that he's a Tunisian citizen. We don't want him back. And Italy's like, no, but we have to deport him. Yes, we know he's a Tunisian citizen. And Tunisia won't take him back. So that's a huge problem right there. And then Italy has to release him because he served his sentence. And they say, but you have to leave the country in 7 days. But he doesn't. He goes to Germany. Then Germany finds out who he is, has his criminal background, and knows he's beginning to work with ISIS. They set to deport him. Their system worked as well in the beginning. But then Tunisia won't take him back. So he's roaming the streets of Germany. There, I think that looking back at it with the benefit of hindsight, maybe we could, fair to say that they should have known this in advance. Put him in a holding cell, right? So if you're...
Yeah, but you know what,
But he served his sentence.
Right, and then we know if Tunisia won't take him back, what happens when you put him in a holding cell? It's tough to use this guy as an example because no one wants to have an ounce of sympathy for him. But the result is, if that's the problem and you think somebody's been radicalized, you put them in a holding cell and they'll stay there forever. Or they'll stay there 10 years. They'll stay there some amount of time. Because Tunisia's never going to want him back, and Germany, correctly, is never going to want him roaming the streets of Berlin.
I feel like one of the bigger problems, though, is, here in the U.S., like we have a bit of a police state where we feel like everyone is indiscriminately being spied on. And interestingly enough, I feel like in the European Union, you have the exact opposite of that, where you don't have the countries communicating with one another. I mean, think about the fact that this terrorist attack happened in Germany. He traveled to Italy by train through France. And then at that point, he's in Italy and he's obviously walking around out in public. Like, there needs to be better communication among the countries in terms of how they're going to deal with this situation, how they're going to deal with travel from one country to another. Like, I know that it's a lot more complicated than that, but I mean, this guy has a record. I'm not saying we have to keep him in a holding cell, but there should have been, I guess, better monitoring of him and his activities.
I just don't. I mean, the EU. The whole point, one of the frustrations of Britain leaving the EU is you can travel freely. I don't think there's any. I mean, traveling from Italy to Germany is like traveling, sort of, like from Omaha to Los Angeles now, right?
Yeah.
I haven't been there.
Yeah.
You ever been to Omaha? You would love Omaha.
Look. So here's the thing, guys. They're in a tough spot, man, these governments. And it's easy to criticize from all different angles. I'm trying to be as fair as we can here in what went right and what went wrong. And so the Italian officers did catch him. And Christian Movio is the one who got shot in the shoulder. He's recovering now. And Luca Cicada was the trainee. He was a police officer trainee that once he pulled out the gun and shot his fellow officer, was able to take out his gun and kill him.
Yes.
Before he got shot. So if people want to give him a medal and stuff, great job by that officer, right? So, and they identified him, they pulled him over, they were more than fair to him, as he was pulling out his ID,
look,
pretending to.
In the United States, and I'm not, we would do things differently. When he reached into his backpack, he would have been killed, and I'm not, because we were...
and I don't want that, but you see the downside of
not.
that.
The guy got shot. The result was a cop got shot. So, I mean, both sides of that argument have an interesting argument to make. And in this case, it was the right guy. The dangers, of course, is when it turns out it's not the right guy and he was just reaching into his backpack.
And it's one thing when you got a 12-year-old kid in a park in Cleveland reaching for a bag or whatever, right? And it's another thing when you've got a guy who you stopped because you think he looks like the terrorist that you have an international manhunt for,
right.
then maybe you don't let him reach into the bag, right? So that's where Anna's point about Europe's a little bit more liberal than we are. Usually a great thing. In that one specific case, a little bit more caution would have been better, but they got him.
Yeah, look, I'm going to keep it real, and I hope no one misinterprets what I'm trying to say right now. Look, European countries are taking in a lot of migrants right now, and it's a great thing that they have compassion for refugees. I wish the United States had more compassion, but there has to be, and look, this guy is not a Syrian refugee, obviously. We've already ID'd him, we know who he is. But nonetheless, if you have this influx of people coming into your country, you have to ensure that you have a stronger system put in place so bad guys don't somehow get caught up in the mix, or they don't get in the mix. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but we have a super strong system in America.
We do, and that's a good thing.
It takes 18 to 24 months to get past our vetting. Now, in Germany and Italy, again, to be fair to them, he did not pass their vetting. They wanted to deport him.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest culprit there is Tunisia, and I'll tell you why. Look, I get it. If you're Tunisia, why do you want a criminal to come back in? And apparently the guy was dangerous, and you wouldn't want him in your country. But if your citizens are going to go to other countries, and you're okay with that, well, you've got to take them back if those countries are going to deport them. If you don't, that's not a fair trade. Then I think the Germans get to go and the Italians get to go, hey, maybe then I don't take anybody from Tunisia. Right? Mm-hmm. Because if it's one thing to be humanitarian, which we're all in favor of, it's another thing when they don't reciprocate.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and of course, that this guy had been radicalized and he'd already committed a crime and that he wasn't in the country theoretically, legally, at the point where they release him, right? I mean, he's been in prison. I don't think he has a visa at that point. So then I get it. Then you can put him in a detention center. Like then you can.
He's breaking a law by being there illegally.
Then you can certainly hold him.
But because the Italians gave him 7 days to leave the European Union, and he did not.
Yeah, we would not. I mean, we know we would not do, and I don't think Americans would stand for that.
Yeah.
To me, an interesting part of this story that jumped out at me. You know how they ID'd this guy? He left his wallet.
That's right.
He left his wallet in the truck.
Yeah, but the crazy thing is they didn't find it until the day following the incident.
The next they didn't find it till the next day.
It's probably one of those slim wallets you get online now.
Yeah.
Fell
No,
between
no,
the
I
seats.
know.
That's like robbing the bank and you leave your ID. Well, what the F?
That happens a lot, actually.
Well, so there's two layers of stupidity there, right? One is, to be honest, the German authorities, for Christ's sake, they arrested a Pakistani kid, had nothing to do with it. In the meanwhile, his ID is sitting in the truck, right? And then there was on the first day, the first 24 hours, there's talk of the Polish guy in the truck, who's the poor son of a bitch is the guy who was killed by the terrorist, right? And he was the original driver. If you've got the guy, you took the Polish body out of the thing, look right next to it, the wallet's right there, right? So, I feel bad saying it because the Germans went through this, but
we don't know where it was. We don't know why. We just, again, some of the stuff is going to turn out, some of the things that are being reported today in this piece that we're reading from the Washington Post are going to turn out not to be true, not because the Washington Post got it wrong. It's just that the retelling of events has not been fully constructed.
We're too close to the event.
Yeah,
I hear you. So, but that's a small part of it. The bigger part of the stupidity is the attacker, right? So that gets to a small point and a larger point. So the small point is what Jimmy's saying here of, like, these guys are not criminal masterminds, right? Like, he's so stupid. He ran away. It's not like he wanted to get caught. If he wanted to get caught, he could have done a shootout with the cops. He had a gun, right? Right there in Germany. No, he thought he was going to get away with it, but the schmuck left his wallet behind, right?
We don't even know that. I mean, think about the complications. This is a 24-year-old guy who was dumb enough to be influenced to commit an act like this where you kill 12 innocent people. And no, the overwhelming likelihood, you're killed. So, turned out it was true, right? Mm-hmm. Not that day, it took a day. You were killed the next day.
3 days.
3 days, okay, excuse me, 3 days later. So he also, we're told, made videos. God willing, we will slaughter you like pigs, right?
Yes.
To brothers everywhere, for the sake of Allah, protect our religion. Everyone can do this in their own way. People who can fight should fight, even in Europe. So he made the video, right? He's not wearing a mask. He's wearing a hoodie, right? So he may have well wanted to be known, and he may have left his wallet there.
Well, that's a great point.
While also thinking it's different to think I'm going to leave my name, but I would like, if I can avoid being shot, I'm going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's a great point by Ben, because the reason why all of these mass shooters, the bombers, whatever their ideology might be, whether it's the guy in South Carolina that killed all the black folks and wrote a manifesto for completely different reasons, whether it's the Muslim bombers or just random mass shooters like the kid who shot up the elementary school or the kindergarten in Connecticut, they're doing it for the glory. Like, in their mind, oh my God, I'm going to be a hero. I'm going to be a hero for Muslims. I'm going to be a hero for white people. The guy who shot up the kindergarten in Connecticut had studied all the other mass shooters, and he had gotten all their newspaper clippings, and he wanted to be famous like them, right? So maybe that's why he's like, that's why he's doing the video, and he's leaving ID behind. At a minimum, on an unconscious level, he's doing that. But the bigger point is, if you actually cared about, as he says in the video, the Crusaders coming in and dropping bombs in Syria or whatever, well, it's a bizarre way of proving your point. I know that we're not going to be able to reach a lot of the terrorists out there, but I think that if we all, as in the media, put this out, maybe it has an effect later. Like, to say, I can't believe the Westerners are killing innocent civilians, hence I will kill innocent civilians, is just about the worst point you could ever make.
Yeah, you give them more of a reason or an excuse to continue on with the same policies that you claim that you're against.
In fact, they will further those policies.
Exactly.
But they're not being...
They're not rational people.
Right, and they're not being... And mostly, they're not being radicalized by rational people. They're being rationalized by... And by the same token that almost everyone who reads the story about Trump and Putin both deciding to talk and tweet about an arms race within 8 minutes of each other think, okay, I don't know whether they had a conversation, but somebody had a conversation, because this suits them both. This suits them both right now. And it's dangerous for us because in the long term, because it's for obvious reasons. And it suits the people who did the radicalization. I don't think many of them actually want peace. Call me crazy, but this suits them, and which makes our response to the policy, in a sense, all the more puzzling, because we're doing the exact thing that barbarians are hoping we will do, because they like that, and then they recruit, and then that's their Their life is given meaning and reason in fighting us.
And so you're absolutely right, Ben. Then us killing innocent civilians to show them that it's wrong to kill innocent civilians is also not logical, right? So look,
And real quick, and I think in asking us to make the distinction is one thing, meaning in the West, asking them to make the distinction of intent, whereas this guy intended to kill civilians, that was the sole purpose. It wasn't, civilians weren't killed as a means to a greater military goal. He just wanted to kill as many people as he possibly could with the truck, right? Mm-hmm. We would defend that by saying when we kill civilians, it is unintentional. We are trying to kill a leader and a leader a thing, and civilians were killed as a byproduct of that, and it's war and it's terrible. I think that is there is some rationality to that argument. It's been made throughout history in war. But asking the victims and the people around there to draw that careful distinction when innocent people and children are being killed is ridiculous. That distinction will not be made by millions and millions of rational people who you are desperately hoping to win over to your side.
well, there's many layers to this. First of all, when we make the case that we're not intending to kill civilians, but sometimes Western countries have a 100-to-1 kill ratio versus their opponents when it comes to civilians, you begin to doubt our intentions, right? So, and even if you don't doubt our intentions, they certainly doubt it on the ground, right?
Right, yeah.
As their civilians are being killed. So that cycle of violence doesn't help anybody. Second of all, then you've got other players like Russia and Iran and Syria working together in Aleppo, and according to the United Nations, very clearly targeting and murdering civilians. Mm-hmm. So now they might look at that and go, the West, or they might say, Iran. But those people on the ground are. But look, if you're a person, whether you're Muslim or not, who actually cares about innocent Muslims being killed in the Middle East from bombs being dropped, whether it's Russia, the U.S., whoever it might be, killing other innocent civilians will only get more of innocent Muslim civilians killed, will get Muslims targeted throughout the West, is a deeply reprehensible and immoral thing to do anyway, by your own admission, because that's why you're so upset. But fourth of all, is counterproductive, and the better way to do that is to show the West what is actually happening. So if you shot a video as opposed to human beings, you would serve what you claim is your purpose 1,000 times better. You remember that kid in Aleppo, the one that was put in the ambulance, and after the building was bombed, and he was really shaken, and everybody in the world covered it.
Yep.
And that created so much more sympathy for, and rightfully so, for the innocent Muslim victims in Syria, than not just the terrorist act, all the terrorism in the world combined, because all the terrorism in the world combined is counterproductive, right?
Yep.
So if you actually care, then they don't.
They don't.
The terrorists who do this, they're all for their own personal glory and getting famous.
That's right. And also, I mean, we always, for some reason, forget to mention this in these types of conversations, but a lot of innocent Muslims are victims by radical terrorists. You know what I'm saying? The same
majority.
Yes,
That's who radical terrorists, that's who they kill, other
Yes.
Muslims, way more than anybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, not only in the majority Muslim countries where they do most of their bombings, but even in the middle of an attack like in Paris, they killed a whole heap of Muslims there. Lots of Muslims died in the 9/11 attack that were inside the buildings, but they don't care.
They don't care. It's
right.
about their radical interpretation of the doctrine. And, you know, if you don't believe in that strict fundamentalist interpretation, then you're not Muslim enough and you deserve to die. That's their so-called reasoning and their rationale.
And by the way, if you read the Quran, it's got terrible parts. That's part of the reason why I'm not a Muslim anymore. It also has parts that says if you commit suicide, and there's the suicide bombers, there is no way you can get into heaven. So so it's not about the literal words. You can take the literal words in either direction. It's about these guys thinking that they're heroes and they're going to do it in a malicious, horrible, immoral way. Because if you wanted to be productive and you actually cared about the innocents, showing the world what happens to those innocents is so much more important. Get the full 2-hour show ad-free. Become a member, tytnetwork.com/join.